Greetings and welcome to From the Basement. In this video, we're going to do a lightning-fast overview of GIMP, the GNU Image Manipulation Program, which is an image editor, of course. There are far better and far more thorough tutorials on GIMP out there on the internet. The purpose of this one is just simply to go over some of the most basic tools so that way you can get started creating some very simple placeholder pixel art. This is intended to complement the Galactic Mailer project series for the Game 105 class. I am not an artist, so if you are looking for specific tips here, perhaps to increase your skill level, probably should go find a different video. Alright, so let's get started with the basics here. Let's get an image going. When you first open up GIMP, by default it will not have an image open. We're going to have to go to File and New. The size will always default to pixels. Under Advanced Options, the only thing you really need to worry about is this fill width. Now this does have some impact on your tools. Fill with background color, well, the default behavior of the eraser is to erase to the fill color. What is your background color? Well, if you look over here in our toolbox, you can see these two colored squares. The one on top is our foreground color. The one on the bottom is our background color. So in this case, I would create an image that had a white background. If I flip them, clicking that little arrow there, and click OK, of course have my background filled with black. If you instead need a transparent image, and I just clicked on the X to close out that image, you can instead say fill with transparency, and now regardless of what your color is, you're going to erase to transparent. I'm going to show exactly what I mean by this. I'm going to switch this back to fill with background color, switch this over to white, click OK. Alright, so what are some of our basic tools? Well, our two most basic tools are the pencil tool and the paintbrush tool. The pencil tool does not alias the brush. What do I mean by aliasing? Well, if I draw this and then I zoom in, I'm going to use Control mouse wheel to zoom in. You notice we've got hard-edged pixels here. It's either black or it's not. It's this color or it's not. If instead I choose the paintbrush and paint, you notice now I've got it sort of blurred out. It's not filling up the entire paintbrush area with color. That is aliasing. And when you zoom back out to a normal zoom level, you can see that the alias line looks smoother, sort of fuzzier, as compared to the more jagged, darker, non-aliased line. Now, when you're doing pixel art, or at least when you're doing it for a game maker and you're just starting, I would highly recommend that you stay on the pencil tool, because there's some issues with using the paintbrush, which I'll get to in a moment. The other common tool that's good for shading is the airbrush. Now the airbrush is a little bit different than the other tools, and that is the longer you hold it down, the more you apply to the one spot. So again, probably easier to see this if I zoom in. If I click and hold, you can see that spot slowly filling in with color. That's what the paintbrush does, or the airbrush does. Both the pencil and the paintbrush tool do not operate like that. If I click and hold, as long as I don't move the mouse, the color does not change. Same thing for the pencil. If I click and hold, well, obviously since it's filling in the whole brush, there's nothing in there for it to increase. That's not continuing to put down additional color unless I move the brush. The airbrush, well, it's acting like an airbrush. It's a continual application of paint. The next common tool would be the fill tool, and this one shows the problems with if you're not careful of aliasing. So let's say I want to fill in this whole area with black. So I'm going to red. So I'm going to click on my color square, click on red, fill this in, and notice now I've got this white outline, especially if I zoom back out to a normal zoom level. I've got like this white halo effect now on everything. That's because when it aliased it out, it basically kind of blended the black and the whites together, leaving a color that wasn't quite black and wasn't quite white, and therefore the fill tool ignored it, and you get this little halo effect. Now, that is why I recommend sticking with the pencil tool when you are doing your artwork. The next tool I want to go over is the eraser tool. Now the eraser, if you did fill with background color, will erase to whatever your current background color is. You notice my current background color is red, so I am erasing to red. Now, by default, the eraser is an alias tool. You can see here, erasing is aliasing out the lines. If you do not want that, you can come over here to the options and set it to hard edge. And now it doesn't alias. Depends on what you're using the erase tool for. And if I change the background color, say this purple, now I'm erasing to that color. For selections, you've got a variety of options here. Square select pretty much does what it says. Now, when you select an area in GIMP, that is the only area you can modify. So if I now grab my pencil tool and start to draw, I can only draw in that selection area. I can't draw outside of it. Now, there's a couple of useful modifiers for the selection tools. One, after you've already started selecting, that's important, after you started selecting, if you press and hold the Shift key, it will lock your shape to a uniform scale. So now I'm doing a square. If instead I do the Control key, the center of the shape will be where you clicked. Normally, the center of the shape is, or the origin of the shape is in the upper left-hand corner. Notice I'm going to click right here, and my square is anchored on that point. One of my corner will always be anchored where I clicked. Whereas if I press and hold Control, you notice now it's the center is where I clicked. You can also do a Control-Shift to get both modifiers. Not so useful for the square, very useful for the circle. If I know I want to encircle, say this right here, I can center my cursor over it, click. Now by default, it's going to draw a box that's going to have a circle inscribed inside, which that's not what I want. But if I do Control and then Shift, now I can draw a perfect circle on that specific point. The paint can also has an interesting feature to it. You can choose to do fill whole selection instead of fill similar colors. Now I'm losing my marching ants here. I suspect it's because I am trying to record and I have set the Windows properties to basic. So I think that's why I'm losing my marching ants right now, showing where my selection is. Normally you should still see where your selection is. Notice because I told it to fill selection, it filled it in. Notice your selections are feathered or aliased. If you don't want that, you have to go in and turn off aliasing so that way you get hard edges. The lasso tool is freeform select, allowing you to fill in any random shape that you so desire. Now there's a couple of modes of this. You can do a continuous drag, and it will do its best to keep track if you cross over the line. I honestly wouldn't recommend doing that because it's really kind of hard to tell where it's going to say it's going to fill and where it's not going to fill. You can also do it in straight lines like this. Now how you close this tool is you have to get it over to the starting point so your starting point turns yellow. Click on it and that will fix it into place. There we go. The fuzzy select tool is kind of like a paint preview select. You can, well, it's kind of hard to see since I'm losing my marching ants for some reason on this recording, but by holding down the mouse key you can see the area that it's going to select if I mouse over different spots here. The select by color will select every instance of that color. So let's say I want to replace this red with, let's say green. Now I could do the paint tool. I'm going to change this back to still similar colors. Oh right, I have a selection active. Control-Shift-A to undo that. But I'm going to miss out on all of these reds in here, and it's just, I'm going to have to go hunting. I don't want to go hunting. So Control-Z for undo, still works. So instead, I will do a select by color, click on the red. Now I can switch back to the paint can and say fill whole selection. And now I just exchanged out, well, almost all of my red. I still have some aliased red bits here that I didn't get. Again, this is why aliasing plus pixel art, usually not a good idea unless you are deliberately doing the shading. A couple of more tips here before we wrap this up. The smudge tool can be very useful. It's basically treats the paint like it's, wet, and you can smudge it out. So like if I want to smudge up this boundary right here, I can smudge it up. It's not. It's a very low-key tool. It doesn't smudge very much, or I could alter the settings on this. But you can get some good effects with the smudge tool. The dodge, darken tool's a little bit kind of finicky to use. I'd be careful with that one. The final tool I want to show is the crop tool. And the crop tool basically allows you to specify which portion of the image you want. So let's say I just want this portion here. I highlight it, click, the rest of the image is cut away. Copying, pasting. If I take a selection and I put it over, Control-C to copy, I can paste this within the same image. I can do a Control-V, and normally you'll have marching ants to show you where it is. I'm just going to have to move it. And then once you have it where you want to place it, you can move your cursor off of it. Notice I have a little anchor symbol now. Click, and that anchors the selection down. I could also take it and paste it into a new image. I can do Control-Shift-V to get a new image, or I can go to File, Create from Clipboard, and that will create a new image exactly to the dimensions of what's in the clipboard. If I happen to have a non-square shape, it will create an image with the smallest possible square shape to contain the image. We will be using this to create our ships later on. And that pretty much ends the lightning fast GIMP overview. I would highly recommend, before continuing on with the Galactic Mailer videos, that you just simply play around with GIMP a little bit, get used to how it functions, and then come back to watch the remainder of the videos. Until then. And wait, I lied! We're not quite done yet. Just remembered as I was getting ready to render out the video, kind of forgot to show how to save the stuff. Just a little important. So, how do we actually save this out? Well, there's actually two different operations. There's saving and exporting. You have no choice when you go to save. If I go to File, Save, I am saving this as an XCF, which is the native format for GIMP. So, I call this MEEP. And that saves all the information. It keeps all of your layers, if you're messing around with those, everything. Unfortunately, not a lot of things can read an XCF file, so we need something else. And that something else is export. If we go to File, either Export to or Export, now we get a chance to specify how we want to export this out. By default, GIMP is going to assume that you're going to want to export a ping, which is exactly what we want to do, so that's good. If you want to export it as a different file, simply change the file extension. So if I wanted to export this out as a bitmap, I would change the extension to a BMP, JPEG, so on and so forth. But a ping is good enough. And when you export as a ping, you don't need to fool around with any of these options. Defaults work just fine for GameMaker. And now I've got that ping file saved out and ready to go. So now we're really done. See you on the next video.